is where Brian really pushed us. And again, I almost cried when he first said it, but of like, hey, how do we bring this to life? And his idea was, what's a museum style exhibit that we could? I think flexibility and adaptability in how you're approaching storytelling is vital to being able to make an impact in your organization. Otherwise, you're just going to lose people. For those of you who may be outside of the United States, the healthcare process can be a bit cumbersome or wonky, maybe, depending on if you want to put it politely. No, this is how it's going to shape where this product needs to go. And so I think if we can build cadences around this that go beyond just even OKRs, but we start thinking about like, we have decision-making engines and practices in place that look beyond just the near term. So I think sometimes I feel like I almost won the lottery in terms of the organization that I joined because...
So today I have Dan Sullivan on the pod. He's Director of Journey Management at CHG Healthcare. Yes, Director of Journey Management. That's his title. And we're going to talk about that, but maybe later. In his role, he leads development and implementation of enterprise-wide journey management practice and helps the organization to connect data, insights, and actions to improve the customer experience and actually drive outcomes. So prior to joining CHG, and some of you might notice, Dan led customer success at TheyDo, but now he's at the customer side, as we call it. He led strategy efforts at other companies ranging from startups to global enterprises, and he's also the proud father of 4 wonderful children. I have 3. I would love to know how he does 4, but that's maybe a topic for another show. He suffers from what we may call an unhealthy affinity for potato chips. He actually had, during COVID, a podcast around crisps, which is fascinating. But today, I want to unravel what building a journey management practice at CHG actually looks like from the inside. So, Dan, it's good to see you, my friend.
It is wonderful to see you, and thank you very much for having me, and thank you for the cool intro. I feel more important than I am, so thank you. I really appreciate it.
Right. Okay, I can check that off, and job well done, I guess. So look, there's a lot of chatter in the industry, like the drive to impact from a customer experience, from a CX perspective, is not the right way to start or to do things anymore. So sure, fine, we've all been there, but now we have like the new kid on the block, right? And you're bringing journey management into CHG as a practice. Mm-hmm. But it's also not about the journey, if we're really honest. Like, it's not about the journey in itself. So I want to start there. And maybe for people listening in, give me the lay of the land of your thinking. Because this is an actual line that you're saying. Like, it's not about the journey. It's not necessarily about the journey management practice, but it's a different way of helping this organization drive impact. So why don't we start there, and I'll let you riff on it, what it means to you, and then we can dig into how you're actually changing this large organization to be customer-led.
Yeah, that sounds awesome. And again, I appreciate the invite and the ask to join. So as I'm thinking about, kind of the shifts in the industry and how it is that we can help an organization think more from a customer-centric perspective, a lot of times I think, especially when I joined CHG Healthcare about a year ago, and a lot of the work that I was doing initially was kind of just thinking from this solo perspective of, hey, I am building a journey management team and I want to try and drive to an impact. And I think a lot of the work that we did was great early on, and it's been really helpful and foundational as basically the database of what we're trying to build. But as I've gone on, as I've started working with other teams like product leads, marketing leads, things like that, where I'm finding you can drive to much more impact is if you're thinking beyond just the journeys that you're building or beyond just the artifacts that you're building, even if you're not lucky enough to have a journey management title. And for me, where I've seen success or where I've seen areas that I think we can lead to real live systemic change, so not just change in terms of one single product team, is reframing how we're thinking about things outside of just our own position and trying to take the insights that we're gathering, trying to take the research that we're basically sourcing across all these different departments and bringing it to life to executives in a way that actually will drive impact based on how they work. So it's really, really important for me to understand who are my partners, what makes them tick, what do they care about, when they get up in the morning, what are they thinking about, and what might help turn their heads to make an impact on behalf of our customer. And so that ethos is something that I try and live, which is like every single conversation I'm going into, I try and anticipate or try and understand who that person is, and where I might be able to communicate with them in a method that can drive to the most value or lead to the most impact ultimately for our customer and for our business overall. And so that's how I frame things. And that's kind of how we're framing things across our whole experience design team at CHG.
Does it have to be that from the leadership perspective, the mandate to be customer centric has to be in place? Because I mean, you've seen many organizations from the inside. Was CHG any different? That it was like over indexing on customers already, or it was like, okay, it was status quo, or was part of the strategy, or not possible at all? Like, was there any difference into how they, from the leadership team, embodied the customer centric way of working or way of being as a company before you started, or when you started?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think sometimes I feel like I almost won the lottery in terms of the organization that I joined, because the desire to marry customer centricity with actual business results is like core and critical within how a CHG works. And so there is deep understanding of the customer perspective. There is a desire to understand, not just things like our NPS scores, which are absolutely vital, but more importantly, like what are those insights and how do they relate to the end user's experience, and how is it that those can ultimately tie back to our sales goals, and how it is that we're looking to grow, and how is it that we're also looking to create a great experience, because we are in the healthcare space. And for those of you who may be outside of the United States, the healthcare process can be a bit cumbersome or wonky, maybe, depending on if you want to put it politely. But the fact that ultimately what we're doing is we're helping to deliver care for patients, like that's just a really nice undercurrent, so that it's not just about sales goals, but it's rather about how can we put providers and doctors in positions to really create a great experience. And so it is vital, literally life and death in some circumstances, that we're creating a great experience that helps get our physicians and doctors in places. And so the organization itself has been set up in such a way where this cascades down, where this idea of customer centricity is so core to what we're building, and it's part of our core values that we look to build against. And sometimes that can be overused a little bit at larger organizations, for sure. But here, I think it's something that we really live, which is kind of putting people first, and looking at those ways where we think about the end user's perspective. And so in joining this organization, I feel like the soil was very fertile to be able to find ways to drive to real impact. And that comes both from our highest level C levels all the way through to our team. So our team, the experience design team that I sit under, our VP, Brian Reed, has been nothing but an advocate for the customer. My direct manager, Ben Gerona, has been absolutely fantastic. And all the colleagues that I work with really embody that spirit of trying to bring to life what segment of the customer experience that they can. But I think the really nice thing is that it's balanced with the idea of this is a business and we are still trying to hit certain goals. And so that is also something that doesn't have to be necessarily reminded often, because that is something that we're held accountable for. And honestly, I feel like that's a perfect space to be able to implement a journey management practice.
Yeah. So what I often see is that if there are ingredients like these present in an organization, then especially from the experience design group or the customer experience group, it's like, okay, is this a lottery ticket that we use to win the lottery with? Wonderful. So we go all in on customers and we forget about the business. So we're all about the customer. We build our teams, we build our processes, we build our practices, and everything's all about the customer. And we forget that we are the business. So what made it so that you didn't do that? Because it is almost like a trap that an organization sets itself up for. It's like, if we're going to be customer obsessed, then everything is about the customer. We're not helping our teams to actually drive results for the business. So when you started, like, where did the moment occur to you, like, we need to balance it out and we need to tie it back to our business impact, because otherwise it's not going to work? Like, where did you realize, like, going all in on the journey, all in on the customer is not enough? It has to be balanced.
I think it actually started with even one of the first sessions that we had, where our CEO, Leslie Snavely, was just kind of talking about some of our readouts and some of the ways that we're performing as a business, and the level of candor and exposure which she was giving in terms of like how we're performing as a business, what are our targets, how are we performing against those across all of our different divisions. I had never seen or an organization this size be that candid with its employees, and it was really, really interesting to see. And then I went into our first monthly product review meeting with leads across all of our product teams, and the first segment is a review of how we're performing against our business goals. And we spend the first 30 minutes of that 2 hour meeting or 2 or 3 hour meeting, I can't recall, sorry, but the first half an hour is all about business results and business metrics, and it's absolutely fantastic. And so for me, seeing that and hearing that after having worked with a lot of organizations that were thinking much more customer centric, but maybe not so much about the business side, the business information was there. Like the understanding and the metrics were all in place to try and bring this to life. And then we had these wonderful folks that were building out these practices for how it is that we're going to consume and receive feedback from our customers, and where the points of friction were was, how does this lay against all of our ecosystem of products and of marketing teams? And how can we start to showcase and organize how all this works together, which is just perfect ground for thinking in a journey centric way. Because then the idea is this practice can help take all the wonderful work that our teams are already doing and bringing them together in a different view, which we hope can drive to even greater impacts as we go into 2026 and beyond.
What was the biggest gap? Because it sounds like there was emphasis on customer feedback and
Mm-hmm.
experience, and there was a big emphasis on the business,
Yeah.
but it wasn't connected.
Yeah. And
So what was the biggest gap that you found like needs resolvement? Like what is the reason or how
Yeah.
that you came with the journey centric approach?
I think the biggest gap, and it has nothing to do in a negative light. It's a natural result of our company continuing to grow as it has over the last 30 odd years of growing into a market leader and growing via acquisition and adding in new product teams, and as it's trying to innovate, building out new mobile applications to help the provider experience, just as an example. So we're basically having an explosive growth, if you will, of the product teams and the marketing teams that are trying to bring things to market, and everyone is smart, is well intentioned, is doing the right thing, and they're trying to think about it from a customer and business perspective. But as you grow, it becomes harder to keep track of how all those things tie together. And that's where I think the idea or the impetus for trying to think about a journey management approach came from. Because again, a very, very, very customer centric organization with great reporting in place, great processes in place, but as it's growing, it becomes harder and harder to maintain and showcase how those different areas are kind of working together. And we have a whole client experience, which are the hospitals that we're working with, the large healthcare organizations that we're working with, and we have a provider experience, which is the doctors we're working with. And so, just as a bit of context, CHG Healthcare is really helping to place doctors and physicians in typically short-term roles where there might be a gap at those hospitals and helping to fill that role. So when I say that there's, a little bit of life and death situation, sometimes that can be the case where it could be an ER room that is short on doctors. We're trying to get those people in place and credentialed in real time. So there are natural points where unintentionally teams might not be understanding what the other is working on. So we're building something that's great for the client here, but that could actually have ripple effects down the road on our doctors or our providers unintentionally. And so this is an opportunity where I think we can help bring things together to make a more cohesive experience across teams.
Why did you land on a journey? Like from all the different ways that you could potentially take this on, like
Mm-hmm.
what was the reason that was the approach versus like, oh, we're all going to be like agile, we're going to implement OKRs throughout the organization and everything will be fine, or pick your method. Like what made this the preferred route? And I'm also curious, like, where did you start? Because the other reason is that I'm seeing organizations fail, even there's an emphasis on customer experience, is that we start to do it all. We start to bring the whole perspective together, the end-to-end experience. We're breaking it down by all these different journeys and bringing it down to all the different teams.
Yeah.
And ultimately, we spend 2 years of like figuring things out.
Yeah.
And nothing changes. So really curious to hear, like, why journeys? Maybe it's an obvious question, but love to hear it from you. And then where did you start?
Yeah. So I think why journeys goes back to even before my time joining the organization. So Jeremy Johnson, who's one of our product leads, started hearing about journey management and as the team was building out Agile and as they were building out OKR structures of how they're working through things. So yeah, we're checking those boxes as going. I think he saw that there is an opportunity to think about the holistic end user lifecycle and how all these points tie together. And so he actually started the process of building this out. And over time, it's evolved. We've had folks like Aaron Tate and Xiao Wen on our team join and try and build out this practice. And so when it came time for me to join the organization, there was already a structure and a rough scaffolding in place of, hey, we think these journeys can really help, starting with the product lead. And I think that was really, really important because we had some early buy-in from folks that were actually, delivering things to market that had value. And we're thinking about this from a journey-centric perspective, which was really, really great. Um, and so that was why Journey initially. Now, when I joined about a year ago, where I started was taking a look at what all had been built, where all had we been thinking from like an organizational goal perspective, what were the targets for the year, what research was already in place. So kind of trying to think about like not what was the easiest, but what was the place that I could make the impact the soonest is where I started to think. And so a lot of the research that we had done recently was on the provider perspective, the doctor perspective. So I latched on to that. There was work in place there that had already just recently been done. So I knew, hey, I could potentially start to build off of some new research that we gathered. We were just shifting as part of the customer experience team to do a new quarterly customer experience survey, and we had just gotten some beautiful results that were getting delivered to the organization. So it provided a really great opportunity to latch around this and build it. But I think the biggest, thing that really helped us as we were getting going was not just trying to force journeys in and of themselves, but rather positioning this as a way to contextualize all the work that the teams were doing because there was a hunger for it. There was a hunger within the organization to understand, hey, I'm building, X, Y, and Z widget. How might that relate down the road to this provider when they're actually not even using the app that I'm working on, but they have to get credentialed so they can go work in a different state? And that to me just gave like a really nice opportunity for us to start to focus on. And it was a wonderful experience to start building all those things. But I had a lot of predecessors before me when I got started that made this an easier path for me as I got going.
What was the way that you started to reconcile like how the different teams relate to the same customer journey or the same
Hmm.
customer experience? Because bringing all these connection points
Yeah,
together, like it's like a crazy body of work. And maybe we should talk about where you are in that process right
yeah.
now. But like where did you see the biggest need was, and how did you actually bring some of those teams together? Like what were some of the tactics that you
Sure.
applied to actually like get them to talk
Yeah.
and see them from the same side and make sure that they're not developing the same solution for the same problem without knowing that they are doing that?
For sure. No, it's a great question. I actually, when I initially started, I had got some interest from a product team that was working on a net new build, and I started laying out some kind of future state journeys, which was not intentionally where I wanted to go, but it was a really interesting opportunity for me to start to think about, okay, as we're looking at building this new process, it actually intersects with a lot of the different tools that we're bringing to life as it comes to matching somebody with a new opportunity, a doctor with a new opportunity. And it gave me a line of sight to understand, oh, okay, I can see where there's friction points. I can see how these teams might run into some issues. And I started building out this end-to-end journey that had been, part of my task when I joined, like, hey, we really want you to build out this, what became our journey atlas. But it was I think, so I joined in November of 2024, and I think it was in February of 2025 this year when Brian Reed, our VP, had an idea that, like, hey, we have a really big event coming up in May. It's going to bring in all of our leaders across our digital marketing organization. We're going to have engineering, product, marketing, everybody that can make a decision against everything that you're doing journey wise. Can we make a splash? Can we do something that's really interesting to make this an immersive experience, to almost launch this concept of what you're building so that you're not constantly just thinking of things in a silo? And to be honest with you, my initial reaction to this idea, which I'll get into, was almost like, oh, I don't know about that. I think it might make sense to just stay small, keep my head down, keep building this, just build little things. And Brian challenged me to, like, no, I think you should, like, go for it, and like let's use the whole group to try and bring this to life. And that really resonated with me as somebody who's worked at startups in the past and has maybe wanted to be a filmmaker when I was a child, like to be able to tap into that kind of creative side of my brain to bring this to life. And so we worked together to basically build out a whole immersive journey experience to help those teams kind of discover the journey on their own, which was really cool.
What was it like? Like what when you say immersive? Like
Hmm.
what am I seeing? Like is it
Sure.
like a virtual experience? Is it like a physical experience? Are people like in the office,
Yeah.
like walking through the journey? Like talk to me. Like what was that like? What you built?
It was all of it, and it was wonderful. So how we started is focused first and foremost on building out the end-to-end journey atlas across 8 key phases that we worked with our XD team and some of our product leadership team to identify. Here were the 8 phases we wanted to build against at a high-level journey map. We structured those. We built them in TheyDo, where we connected all the points of what we were building towards. We tied into our Jira tickets. We added in metrics. Candidly, as a former TheyDo employee, it was everything I always wanted to do when I was helping advise customers. I was like, no, just get in there and just do it. Like, so it was really fun. I had a lot of like several years worth of ideas that I was able to then riff off of, which was great. But then from there, it was, yeah, that's great, but how do we tell a story? And so we started playing around with like, what's a metaphor that we could use to bring this to life? And where we landed was the concept of a transit map in a major city, because just like a single journey map could be thought of as like a ride on a train in the CTA in Chicago. As a former Chicagoan, I always resonate there. We wanted to think about the holistic system and how all these points interconnected and how bus and rail need to work together and be maintained on a consistent ongoing basis. And to me, that was something that really resonated in terms of what is journey management versus journey mapping. And so we built a Figma prototype to help take our end users or our viewers through this journey from start to finish. We created videos against each of these phases to tell the story of what's happening at each of these stations, if you will. And then we built an actual Confluence page, because that's kind of our internal wiki that we use internally, to explain this, to show people how you could interact with this artifact, this digital artifact. But that was just where we started. So that was kind of our database. And then the idea is we had this big event that we wanted to kind of make a splash. And this is where Brian really pushed us. And again, I almost cried when he first said it, but of like, hey, how do we bring this to life? And his idea was, what's a museum style exhibit that we could have that could make people physically, tangibly interact with what this journey is to help them understand what we're trying to build? And so we worked with our entire experience design team, which is like creative services, marketing operations, all of our design teams to bring this to life. And we rented out a whole space right across from the cafeteria, because in our headquarters, because everybody needs to eat, right? We knew that that was going to have high foot traffic, so we rented it out. It's a room called the Mermaid Room. Shout out to Brooke Eastham on our team, who negotiated a wonderful price for us to be able to get in there. In the midst of having 500 people descend on our headquarters in Salt Lake City, she was able to get all the furniture moved out and structured in a way where we could then take people through a journey from our doctor's perspective. And so we had a huge video monitor that was basically playing a 2-minute ad of, here's what the Journey Atlas is, here's how it works, here's how you want to interact with it to draw people in. We gave them physical printout maps to show them, this is your journey, here's where you are within the phases. And then we took them through 4 key stops along that journey, starting with awareness. So in our awareness phase, we had all of our CCTV ads playing in a loop, so people could see what are the advertisements that are being served to doctors who are watching things like, any streaming content. We had these Lego sets that we actually send out to doctors and providers to let them build their own career to showcase the work of what we're doing. We had some of the printouts that are actually given at like to clients and to providers at what am I trying to say? The like any events that they might be able to go to. And we actually have petting exhibits at a lot of these events, like physician events or client events, like hymns and events like that, where they'd be able to go to. So people could kind of get a sense of like, oh, this is, if I'm a doctor or if I'm a client, I'm thinking about working with a locum tenens company like ourselves, this is what we're putting into market. And so that was a whole section of the museum exhibit, if you will, all about let's have awareness and let's showcase what marketing is. And that was super cool, because we heard from people, even as they went in there, like, oh my gosh, I had no idea we're doing X, Y, and Z. I didn't know that we had ads that were running. And it's like, wow, cool. Okay, awesome. So you're starting to see the benefit here. And then we took them through the rest of the provider journey, going from, okay, you're aware of what we're doing. Now, what happens after you reach out to our sales team? What does that look like? How are we matching you with opportunities to place you in a position where you can drive to an impact? So we had new product features that were getting launched. We had some specific things that happen in this phase called a present, which probably doesn't matter, but it's just a key part of like something that everybody in our organization knows about. And we let them see what that looked like. We let them interact with that on a large screen so they get a sense of, this is actually what our providers and our clients are seeing when they're working with us. And then we moved through to credentialing, which is the process of getting basically licensed to be able to go work at a new location. So if you're a doctor and you're in one state, you need to go to another state. There's a whole new set of licenses. Like I mentioned, there's the U.S. healthcare is crazy, and we actually did it with like an interactive game show that showed you like, hey, here's some of the things that are going on state by state. Can you guess which state has this to make it fun and entertaining? And then we lastly took them to on assignment where they could interact with what the application the providers use when they're on assignment to actually interact with their reps to understand what that process looks like. And then throughout, we had basically big maps showcasing where you are in the journey. We had feedback from our clients and providers, anonymized and kind of synthesized to showcase big pain points, and then a whole wall of computers that let people interact with the digital journeys that we had built. And it was awesome. It was absolutely fantastic.
What were some of these? So good to hear because I know many people that are listening, like, oh, this sounds like fantastic to do
Yeah.
in my organization, but I can't, I won't, or whatever. But you should.
Yes.
So, talk to me about some of the benefits. Like, it's obvious, right?
Yeah.
Immersive experience. Yes, people like can walk in their customer shoes. I mean, in your case, in your provider shoes, like that's wonderful. But I can only imagine that it also raises eyebrows, right? Understanding the pain points, seeing things for the first time, having different people from different teams, like for the first time together, meeting them literally in that immersive experience. So talk to me about some of what has actually happened because of this, or in the experience that was maybe like the effect of it.
In the experience itself, it was nothing short of fantastic. Like there were moments, and it was really, really cool. We were able to get on the agenda for this big conference that we had, and where there were segments of the agenda where people had to come through this, or didn't have to, but you could sign up for that session to come through it. And so at points, it would be just like standing room only, no room, and you could hear different product teams basically like aligning on backlog items. Like that was my favorite moment when I was standing behind two product managers, and they were basically like, "Oh, I didn't know you're building that. I'm actually working on something similar." And it was just such a cool inception moment where they got it and they understood what journey management could be. And that was awesome. And then seeing like, oh, I didn't know we were doing this marketing wise, or, ooh, this would be a pain point. And I had a few people come up to me and not tell us how wonderful we were, but tell us, you know what, this is outdated. This is wrong because we've done X, Y, and Z. And that was great because then I can be like, oh, awesome. Am I wrong here? Please tell me where I can do better. And then that starts a conversation and it shows that we're interested. And so that alone was just one of the most wonderful experiences. And then we also had built into the agenda of the event itself where I was presenting, here's this concept that we're doing, the Journey Atlas that we've built. And had I just gone up there and presented and launched it, I think the only attention I honestly would have gotten is people that were kind of interested in it anyway before I got hired. You know what I mean? Maybe a few others I would have brought along with me. But it was really fun because now everybody saw it. And now whenever they went to go get lunch, they had to look at it. They had to hear an annoying video. I was standing out there maybe shamelessly yelling at them to come in and take a look, whatever. But it was a good experience and it gave a lot of exposure to what we were trying to build. And so we got feedback, good, bad, and otherwise. And then that is now ballooned where we've been able to spin that into journey-led workshops that we're working with our marketing teams to think about ways that we can increase how providers are referring one another, or how we might be able to combat things like cancellations, which is a challenge for us as a business and impacts our bottom line significantly. Both of those do. Working with our product ops team to think about OKR structuring and how this can come to life within the journey experience to showcase, are we building towards these areas? And then I think most importantly, it was getting the eyes from senior leadership to understand that not just journey management, but that this whole experience design function, which within our organization is, our insights team who is doing all of our interviews and research, the CX teams that are gathering feedback, our design teams, our marketing operations teams, our creative services teams, and thinking about, oh man, they can actually help us tell stories from the perspective of our clients in ways that is really galvanizing and is really inspirational to other people. This might be a really good opportunity for us to lean into and a group to tap into to make a bigger impact. And so for us, we're having a lot of impact kind of on smaller levels within different teams. But the stuff that gets me really excited is starting to rethink how it is that our organization can make decisions and how our different groups can work with one another. And that would never have happened had we not followed Brian's lead and kind of kicked down the door. And honestly, what I tapped into was all those things I used to do when I worked at startups and when I tried to find my own business, which is like went on Fiverr and find somebody to help me build a video and like, oh, we got to do this. So I just got to learn how to use the software. And if it's not great, whatever, we're going to do it. And I'm going to write the script and it'll be ugly and it just is what it is. And it was a great experience. And I know not everybody will have the luxury of having all of these like fun resources that are not just available to them, but are also like, let's do it. Like that was awesome. But find ways. I would just say find ways to find creative ways to kind of kick down the door in your own way if you can. If that makes sense.
If you're enjoying this conversation, don't forget to subscribe on your favorite podcast channel and leave a review. It makes all the difference. The Experience Edge podcast is where I interview business leaders, CX pioneers, and the best designers who share their insight on creating business impact, having an edge on the customer experience. Do you want more exclusive content and behind-the-scenes access? Check out the Experience Edge podcast on YouTube and LinkedIn so you don't miss a thing. Yes, that makes a lot of sense. And what I really like about this example is that what you're actually saying is like you created your own, like this is your awareness stage, right?
Yeah.
And like bringing like a journey-centric philosophy to life and making sure that the teams are aligned and decision-making flows. You got to start with like building awareness. But what I like about this, if we pick awareness a little bit apart, is that where a lot of teams go and they say like, we're going to make people solution. Right? The journey is the solution. Journey management, that's the solution. That's how we should go.
Yeah.
But you actually said, no. Let's make them problem aware.
Yeah.
Let's really make sure that those product owners that are standing there together, seeing that they have different items on their roadmap that are basically solving the same thing, that is actually a problem.
Yeah.
That should not happen.
For sure.
And once they get it, like I'm sure you can now walk into any of their teams and say like, hey, here's some insights that I want to discuss with you because I think like we're doing the wrong thing or the right thing. This might be doing this. And they will be all ears.
Yeah.
But had you not done that, and if you go into an organization today with journey management as the solution, you go talk to the product managers, you go talk to the product owners, they go like, yeah, well, whatever, Dan. We got a roadmap, we got a backlog, like, get some room in the next 6 months with us. We'll listen to you then.
Yeah, for sure. And that definitely helped with that. And even more than that, it's led to a lot of co-creation, which is what's even more exciting. So it's not just like, we're open to listening to your feedback. It's individuals who, like I said at the beginning, genuinely care about creating an awesome experience for our customers, for our business, and they want to help us build it in a way. And so like when I go in there or when we're looking at showcasing these, I was just meeting with one of our product leads on the provider experience earlier this week, and he gave such great feedback of how we could make this work more impactful for his team as they're thinking about planning for next year and where we can go and looking at building this together and like how do we structure the data that we're pulling in to make these like metrics come to life within the journey in a way that is just, I think, revolutionary. Like I think can change how we do things, and it's really awesome to see.
Can you share a little bit more about that example? I think would love to hear. Like, if you can, like, what does it look like? Because we have our metrics in our journeys, we understand the data, and we're like, maybe another point to add to this. I'm curious if it relates. If not, you can ignore it. But what I'm seeing is that we like to count things, right? The more data we have, the more weight it has, and therefore it must be better.
Yep.
But sometimes it's like the critical pain point is hiding behind that big pile of data, and there's something there that we might have missed. So bring that to life on equal footing is like critical. It sounds like that is something that is happening. So talk to me, like what would be an example of this, or like what is actually happening like in this context?
Well, the first version of the journeys that I built, I put as many metrics as I could on every single step to showcase, hey, we have pretty charts in these journeys, and look at its data, so it must mean something, right? And it did mean something. Like it wasn't arbitrary. I put a lot of thought into it. But I think what I realized was like, we don't need help finding the data. The data exists. We're already looking at it. We're already ingesting it. As I mentioned at the beginning, we have C-levels taking us through the core processes. We have these MPRs that are going through it every week. Like we don't need another person to serve us the same information. But like where it gets really interesting is now how do we layer some of like the data that's about usage, the usage data that we're doing, and pairing that directly next to the business metrics in a way that it's getting updated based on, Snowflake, our integration there, and how we're looking at structuring some of these things within our journeys so that this can be updated in real time with the idea to showcase, okay, here's the high level business metric we're going after. Got it. Here's our 5-year goal that we're going after. Got it. Here's our product OKR level that we're building. And here's how this kind of intersects with each other across these different product teams. understood. But now we're seeing these metrics happen in real time. What are we doing about them? How are we actually making impacts against these? And how are we using these as a way to not just tell a story, but to contextualize what's happening to make better decisions, to actually drive business results and customer results in a way that this is a contextualized dashboard. This is a contextualized decision-making tool. This isn't a storytelling tool. This isn't a replacement for what you already are using. This is a net new artifact that can help you and can help you as you're thinking about, okay, if we want to combat a certain business problem, let's look at it contextually within the customer's eyes, and let's look at it in these few different lenses. And I think that's where we're seeing a lot of interest, and that's where we're looking to go, is like, how do we really, really push this in a way that these can come to life even more than they already were?
It sounds almost like taking your transit map analogy, that
Yeah.
the points where the intersections are, where
Yep.
the bus and the tram and the metro and the subway and everything is intersecting,
Yep.
that those reflect the decision points
Mm-hmm.
on certain projects, initiatives, or strategic goals that you're having. And you're able to see it from the customer's perspective,
Yep.
but equally take it from a decision perspective. It's like, where do these things come together?
Yep.
What is like in a nervous system, like the vagus nerve, or like where does it all
Right.
come together to really understand like what we should be looking at together? Is that how I'm picturing that?
For sure. I took the CTA every day for a long time, and the Fullerton stop is a nice little intersection of multiple different train lines, bus lines, things like that. If something goes wrong at Fullerton or Belmont, or something goes wrong at one of these key choke points, it has ripple effects across the entire city. And it is impacting the red line, the purple line, the brown line, all the buses that are kind of going in these different areas. To your point, what I'm trying to structure here is like, how can our journeys be that view where we can understand that, like, where this might seem like one small data point for one product team, how can this actually showcase how it ripples across our entire ecosystem, because it can have downstream effects on the provider, even though it's a client indicator that we might be looking at. And so how we can think about that as a way to try and drive better decisions, I think is really critical.
How do you keep it simple enough to use, but being complete enough to be relevant? Like, I think that's the hard part, right? We can have like a 2000 journey structured atlas, in your words, atlas or framework or data model. Like, you can do that way. You can be too simplistic, have like a couple of key journeys, and the data underneath it is then spread across. How do you keep it simple but effective and complete? Like, what is the trick there? How do you do it? Like, have you found some specific ways that I'm sure people would appreciate hearing on, like, making the layers possible from your business metrics, from the behavioral metrics, from your OKRs, and aligning that with the actual experience and the product teams? Like, how are you doing that?
The trick is that there isn't a trick, to be honest with you. And what I mean by that is I've built the journeys in a way that I try to make them easier to understand. So like our Atlas level journeys all have the exact same structure, from lanes in terms of what you can showcase. And I have filtered versions of each of these journeys that are viewable both if you're logged into TheyDo, which is what we're using to build the journeys, or if you're looking at it from the Confluence page or the Figma page. So I've set it up in that way. But I need to make sure that I have enough information within this journey that I can articulate what it is that I'm trying to say. And then when it comes to how I'm communicating that to my end audience, I shift what that process might look like depending on who I'm meeting with. And so it might sound exhausting. It might sound like it's a lot, but I think that's the work that we have to do to really break through, which is like, I'm meeting with X executive. I know she is not going to want to look at this journey map necessarily as the leading point. So with her, how I think of the journey map is it's almost like a scholarly article where it's a footnote. And so I'll pull it up if we need to be able to showcase it. I need to get to I got 5 seconds. I got to get to the headlines. Here's what I want to tell you. Here's why I want to tell you. Then if you want to see the rest, I'm not going to show you how smart we are for building this. It's rather, here's the insight. Here's what we need to do about it. Here's why. And if you want, we can go into it. Others like to geek out with me on it, and they're like, "Oh, this is cool." I'm like, "Yeah, right." You know what I mean? Like those are the things where you just have to kind of adjust based on where you're going. And I think that's something that I see gets lost a lot with CX teams and with teams both at CHG and in my past of just working with other organizations, where you work on an artifact or you have a story that you want to tell and you want to tell it a certain way. You walk into the room and all of a sudden they need you to, like, they're not open to that. That way of thinking or that way of presenting doesn't work. You have to pivot or they will never listen to you. And so I think flexibility and adaptability in how you're approaching storytelling is vital to being able to make an impact in your organization. Otherwise, you're just going to lose people, and that's what I think, and
Yeah.
that's something I struggle with too. You know?
It's hard. It's hard. Sometimes you don't see the forest for the trees, right? It's really
Yep.
important to know. And funny enough, like customer experience folks,
Yeah.
designers, researchers, CX manager, like everyone, like we're so focused on the customer. We can walk in their shoes,
Yeah.
we breathe and
Yeah.
live and basically can bring any perspective back to the business. But then the moment
Yeah.
we have to talk to our executive stakeholders, like we forget
Yeah.
that we need to do the same there as well and take their
Right.
perspective first and understand like what they need
Right.
from us, what they want to hear, what they need to understand. And we just forget it. We just
Yeah.
blank sometimes.
Right.
Like it
And it's
baffles me.
natural, right? Right. And it's natural, right? But you fall in love with the thing that you're building, and you can see it for its beauty, and you can see it for its wonder, and all the insights that it gather. But I had somebody tell me once that, like, Dan, you're seeing the matrix. I see ones and zeros. I don't know what you're talking about. This doesn't make sense. And that just really resonates with me as a way of thinking. And it's like, okay, how do I make what I see come to life in a way that will translate to you? And for whatever reason, I found what's super effective here within my organization is videos. Videos really help. Short, quick videos explaining what it is, defining it, and then leaving it is an effective way here within the organization. But even as I meet with different levels or different folks, that shifts and pivots. And so I think it's really, really important to think of it as like it's our duty if we want to represent the customer to find a way to break through. And you have to keep trying and you can't get frustrated by it. It's just okay, that doesn't work here. Here's another approach. And you just have to continually look at it that way. Otherwise, I don't think you'll get to where you want to go, you know?
So for the business perspective, it sounds like you found a really good rhythm of like using the rich data, like seeing the matrix, but then bringing it to the level that people can understand what they need to know so they can make their decision or they have their interpretation. Now let's go back to like the experience design or the
Mm-hmm.
experience group that you're
Yeah.
part of. How do you
Yeah.
help them understand the business and help them understand like same like full translation, like how the intersection between what they're working on from the customer
Yeah.
perspective relates back to the specific parts of the business, not all the parts, but only the
Yeah.
parts that they need to know.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's a great question. And that's something like first going back to the first point, like as we're thinking about how we're structuring these journeys, like it's still a work in progress. So everything that we're building right now, just like the journey metaphor or the transit metaphor, like it's never done. It is always going. And I think that that's one thing I just want to say before we get to the experience piece is like you're never done. These journeys you should never think of them as being finished artifacts, and you should never think of how you're presenting. Because even just this week, as I'm getting great feedback and working with product teams, something else comes up or somebody else is struggling with it. And so I'm constantly doing that battle as well. But then when it comes to how we can look at articulating these things, I think again, the same process that you're bringing to executives, the same process that you're bringing to understanding the customer experience is who's the person on the other end of the line? How can I find ways to connect with them? And how can we look at this as a storytelling exercise? So like when I'm working with our experience design team, story is what keeps coming up in my head. And huge credit to CHG. When they hired me, my role was director of journey management, which again, like I have to geek out how cool that is that I have that in my title. It's sweet. But part of the job description listed over and over again storytelling, that you need to be able to distill information and help tell stories. And so that having that in my job description actually is something that's very freeing, and it's something that I might recommend to organizations if you want to buy off or like really buy into journey management. Put storytelling in the job description because I think it's critical and a vital component of being able to think about how you want to bring some of these ideas to life. So that when I'm working with my creative teams or when I get the opportunity to work with these hugely intelligent, really creative people that are just awesome and I love them dearly, it's more of like, I'm not going to geek out to show you the structure of the database of the journeys that I'm building, but it's how can we take this and make this something that's impactful? And how can we help use as a way to tell stories? And I'd be lying if I was to say that it's all me driving it. You know, I have great leaders that are helping pave the way. I have great leaders also on the experience design team, Ben, Aaron Tate, Shawen, Adam, that are just helping me like think about this way that they can bring it to life. And so part of this is co-creation. I've referenced this with the product team. Same thing with the creative services team is like, how do you co-create this with them? And how do you think of yourselves, myself as I'm not somebody who's trying to tell them something they don't know about the business. It's like, let's look at this together. Let's solve this problem together and build that story. And I find that's really effective.
It's almost like the analogy with data, right? I mean, dashboards don't tell stories,
Yeah.
but you can paint a very lively story with data
Yeah.
if you know how to tell it right. And I
Yeah.
think I hear the same here. It's like journeys don't necessarily tell the story, right? You can have a
Yeah.
beautiful journey mapped out. You can have a whole framework, an atlas,
Yeah.
whatever. You can give it to people. That's not the story.
Yeah.
That's like the data. But
Sure.
then you need to take the elements, put them in the order so that you
Yeah.
can actually tell the story as relevant to the people
Yeah.
listening to what you have to say.
Use both sides of your brain, and I think that's fun to do. I think it's a really, I don't know, I feel lucky every single day to be able to do that as my full-time job, sincerely.
What are some of the changes that you have seen in the business itself now that this has become like the way of working, embedded in the rituals, decision making starting to back off of that? OKR structuring is starting to happen
Hmm.
on that. Maybe we should talk about that separately. But like,
Yeah.
what are some of the benefits for the business that you're observing? Like, what has changed?
Yeah, for sure. Um, and one thing I'll say is, again, like I mentioned, is this is something that is evolving. Like, and I think the biggest change that I'm seeing in terms of how all of us are thinking about these things, myself included, even versus when I joined a year ago, is like this level of view. And I talked about this a little bit, or Brian and I talked about this a little bit when we were at the Beyond the Map idea, is like we had set our visions on when we originally went about this process of building an in-person journey map, was thinking almost like we still want to use these journeys as a way to reflect what's happened in the past, and as ways that these journeys can be a really solid way to help us understand that, and then take a look at like our short-term roadmap items. The biggest change that I've seen and the biggest shift that I'm seeing we are still building against is how do we take that same level of like thinking about the end user story, thinking about things horizontally, and use that to really drive our multi-year vision into the future in ways that we're going. And so we've had, nice wins of like, okay, with this product team, we've done this, or with marketing, we were able to think through some ideas here about referrals and stuff like that, which are awesome. And I'm really, really proud of them. What gets me excited, and to answer your question of like real live change, to me is the idea that our leaders are starting to use some of the words of what we're saying from a journey perspective, but more than that, are starting to think about like, how do we tell this story and how do we use this as a way that we can frame our decision making, not just for the next 6 months, but how can we look at this in terms of where do we want to be in 5 years? And because 5 year goals is part of how we plan, 5 year goals is part of how we think, but there's a difference between saying, I want you to achieve that goal in 5 years, and here's what the experience should look like. Those are different things. And so that's where we're starting to really like build that story and work against that. And so I know people are looking for, hey, we just had X% increase in ROI and all this stuff. I actually think this change is far bigger, because I think this is a way of like reframing how we make decisions across the entire, at least our organization. And to me, that's where I think we can make a huge impact.
What are the things that I would see change in the way CHG makes decisions when this is becoming reality? Like, what are some of the things that are going to go away?
My hope is that we can work with the leaders across all of our delivery teams. So when I say delivery teams, I mean our product teams, our marketing teams, folks like that. That as we're thinking about how we make decisions, we're looking at the opportunity statements agnostic of team in a way that is like systemic across the entire group. Meaning like we're not just thinking about a single opportunity statement. How might we're just gonna go after this and there's a few product teams thinking about it. No, it's like how are we thinking about the opportunity statement and balancing it from a business perspective and from a customer perspective, and then having that impact and FX strategy that can go not just for the backlog items that are coming for this quarter. That's what I mean, but like no, this is how it's going to shape where this product needs to go. And so I think if we can build cadences around this that go beyond just even OKRs, but we start thinking about like we have decision making engines and practices in place that look beyond just the near term, still maintaining agility, still maintaining the OKR frameworks that are already in place, but taking another lens to look forward. That's where I feel like we'll be starting to succeed in a way that would make me happier. But we're not there yet, and that's something that we're actively working to build. But it's what gets me excited is if we can have a view, a journey led view of what the future should look like, and we can shift our atlas, really shift it to be then the map of how we get there, that to me will be success. But we're not there yet. We're getting there, but we're not there yet.
Talk to me about the OKR structuring that is happening today, and like how is that shaping up? Because what a lot of organizations have is like this whole like tree structure where all the OKRs ladder up beautifully.
Yeah.
But typically it starts from the 3 to 5 goals that we have for the year, and then all teams can contribute, and it looks great on paper in many organizations, but in reality it's like, it just sounds good if we put it here, and they will like it if we put it there. But it sounds like as you're making the shift, there are now OKRs coming that are actually like rooted in the journey work that you're doing, coming from your client's perspective or the doctor's perspectives.
Yeah.
How is that changing right today? Not necessarily like if the 5-year strategic journey led approach is like truly implemented, but like what is happening today?
Yeah, so what we've done now is we've created within the Journey Atlas a lane that is just our OKR lane that is now laying the OKRs that were built for 2025 kind of horizontally and contextualizing them so that we can start to showcase, look, here's how your teams are intersecting with one another. And then connecting that with the research that we're gathering. So in talking to our product leads, when we're thinking about ways that, like, hey, what might be missing from the OKR process? What came up over and over again was the customer perspective is not loud enough in terms of how we're looking at tracking our OKRs and where they're coming from. We're actually tying them to metrics that are related to like performance. Some of them are business metrics, some of them are just, hey, we want X number of downloads, whatever it is, which is all great and that's all wonderful. But what's missing, what actually was reverse of some of the other areas where we've been seeing of how we were working is we still weren't like bringing to life what are other points of what we're hearing from our customers. So as we're getting more and more like reactive feedback, as we're getting these quarterly surveys that are working, how are we using that to pepper them into our OKRs throughout the year to help showcase like, okay, not only here's how they connect with one another across the customer's journey, but how are we keeping those up to date based on feedback that is ongoing? And so that's now what we're in the process of rolling out right now. And we're working with product teams to help understand, like, all right, here's the opportunities that we've seen. Like we're focusing with for example, just this week, we're talking with the provider team that's building out some of the mobile applications. We're taking a look at some of the historic opportunities that have been identified within this Journey Atlas, looking at re-ranking them as we look to plan for next year, then taking a step back and taking a look at like how this might impact some other product teams based on what's already in place there. So it's understanding the customer perspective, it's contextualizing it against the work of other product teams, and then looking at areas that we haven't really looked to tackle given bandwidth issues, given just the realities of the business, so that what we're building ties back to business goals but also our customer needs and is taking into account like how this works with the other tools and products that are in place right now.
I can imagine this is hard work to do, and at the same time you get people that are super excited about it that will follow you, and there will also be people that are creating resistance or like don't want to change and do not like anything basically that changes. So how are you, I wouldn't say like turning them around, but like how are you navigating that for people who are like implementing a journey centric approach that is actually driving their entire organization to work in a different way, to make decisions in a different way, to work horizontally across different teams? Like that typically is met with a lot of resistance. Like it's natural. So what are some of the things that you've encountered and how did you deal with that?
I won't tell you that everyone is bought into every aspect of what we're doing or like ways that we're working. I think there's a general openness to it, but there's different levels of even within how we're working, engagement with what we're trying to do. And so the way I've approached this is when I first got hired, what I had said was, I think we can go deep or we can go wide in terms of where it is that we want to go. Doing both right out of the gate isn't going to work. And so what I meant by that is I really wanted to focus on just one product line, build it out, prove out the use case, and then spin and grow. And I think that's a very, very solid approach to how to go about generating journey management practice. What flipped on its head here was that there was already some scaffolding in place, like I mentioned. There's already some interest in terms of how we were working. And I had a leader who was like, no, I think you need to think bigger than that. And so we almost went wide to start, which was counter to what I wanted to do, to be totally honest with you. And it worked and it got the attention. Now I'm shifting back to going deep. So it's almost like we went wide, we built out, here's this advertisement, internal marketing, what we want to build, come along with us, co-create with us. You can engage with it yourself. Now we're standing it up in a way to try and make this something that can be really impactful. And now as we're getting into the OKR work, it's now let's go deep. Now let's go deep on this one segment. We're going to spin it up. We're going to prove to you how this can work and where this can go. And then we're going to have to turn around and go wide again. And so it's like, I actually think, and I've never put this in my head until just now. It's like, it's not go wide or go deep. It's, I have to go wide right now, but I'm going to go deep in a second. Do you get what I'm saying? Like, and I'm going to have to switch back and forth as I continue to like bring this thing to life. And that might sound like weird, terrible advice or something, but again, it has to do with pivot based on what your opportunity is and be opportunistic, try and be strategic about where you're going, but meet the market, if you will. If you want to think of like your internal stakeholders as the market on where they are, you know what I mean? And if it's hot over here, dive in there, make an impact, and then think about how you're going to scale it. If the opportunity is to go big, go big. You know what I mean? And then find ways that you can kind of bring it to life. So that might be weird advice, but it's honestly like you have to just continue to shapeshift as you look at trying to bring this to life.
Love that. It seems like you're so in tune with what your organization needs. So my favorite topic, maybe last topic for today, and I can't help myself, but we need to dig into it, is like, who owns stuff? Like, people call it the governance model, people call it like the way of work, but if you bring a journey-centric approach, like, no one owns the journey until you make them accountable for parts of it, until you make them accountable for the end-to-end experience. Like, how is that process shaping up the organization? Do you keep like people who owned a product or owned a specific business line? Do you keep that intact? Like, do you give them new ownership? Like, how does ownership work in this new org design?
Right now, the way our ownership is working, and this might be controversial, but the way that we're doing it is we're keeping it very locked down. And I am partnering deeply with the folks that are most interested in trying to help translate what they're working. And so it's a lot of work. So I have an intern, Angeli Liu, who's been helping me, and she's been a contract worker that's been assisting. But we have some partners throughout the organization, like Sarah Jadlowski, Mia, who's helping these folks on these different teams that are helping us keep certain things updated. But we're locking down the journey quite a bit. And we're finding other methods to give them ways that they can build out journey-centric views or add in additional information. And then my team's almost responsible for checking in the code, if you will, in terms of how we're building and maintaining TheyDo. And this is intentional, and it's nothing against TheyDo. These are things that we're turning on, or nothing against the tool that we're building. But I keep thinking of this as, and you and I talked about this years ago, journey management is a design system. To me, journey management has the opportunity to be an organizational design system in terms of how it is that we're making decisions. And just like you're building a design system within a product team, very often it's a smaller subset of people that are responsible for maintaining and updating those artifacts. And often what they're actually sharing to executives or to leaders are things like prototypes, things like examples that are coming out of this, things like savings that are coming from it, but they're not asking everyone in the entire organization to figure out the pressed state of a button. Same thing here with our journeys. I'm thinking of this as our organizational design system, and I'm very selective about how it's being maintained. So it's understanding the ownership based on like the product team or the marketing team or the initiative that we're working on, working with them to understand what artifacts we want to maintain. And then depending on their level of comfort, depending on their bandwidth, sometimes it's extra hours on my end updating it. And it's something that I'm just willing to do as we look at getting this going. And it's not that there's anything wrong with the process or the tool or anything like that. This is me being hypersensitive to the fact that I want to make sure that what we're delivering is going to be as quality as possible in terms of where we're going.
Right. So everyone has access to the right level of insight, depth, or quality of decision-making tools, whatever you have from it. But what you're saying is like governing the data model, the structure, the journey framework, the atlas, like that's you and the core. But then giving that to the people that need to have the right information to make their decisions. That's democratized. And actually, like, it's more like a hub and spoke model where there's central control, and then you're giving that away to the different teams that need whatever they need. What does that mean for CHG in general? Because this is tool related, and I totally get that, like on the structural part. But actually, what you're creating is an organization that is so in tune with its client, right? The vendors, with the doctors, maybe even end patient. So you're putting the journey as a decision making tool in place. So even if they don't have like tool ownership, what you're creating is ownership over a part of the experience and helping them understand where that sits. Does that have
Mhm.
a fundamental shift in how people like actually perceive ownership in your organization? How they are like in your new model are
Yeah.
accountable for different parts of that? Is that a downstream effect of this?
So one thing I'll say is I think w- what I'm doing more so is reframing all awesome work that's being done by the teams. And what I mean by that is like I don't think this is me telling them something that they don't know necessarily. It's that I can help structure it in a way that brings it to life. And the reason I just want to say that is I think I don't want it to sound like this is me doing this in a silo or in a vacuum. Rather, I'm kind of helping to like maintain the artifact itself, but that it's really co-creation with our team in terms of different ways to bring this to life. And so I want to highlight that there's a lot of really awesome people that are helping me build this. You know what I mean? It's just I might be the one changing the button, right? You know what I mean, or something like. But it's them doing it. But in terms of in terms of that, like right now, ownership isn't shifting in that regard. I think what we're rethinking in general, and this includes myself, and this includes the journey management team, is like how we as an experienced design team, predominantly first and foremost, structure how we're working to ingest the information that we're gathering from our stakeholders, from our customers, from our clients, and rethinking how it is that then we collectively as a unit are taking that information and bringing it to our business partners. And so that's where we're starting. So we don't have downstream effect yet on like product leads or marketing. Like right now they're operating the way that they're operating. We're giving them another lens that we're working against this. In the back end, what keeps percolating and thinking about this is like, how do we, starting within our little concentric circle, how can we start to shift our ways of thinking and become more adaptable to what we're learning and try and push change there. And that's actually where we're starting to see some changes of thinking about things going into next year. So it may not be exactly where, I think like you were shifting, but that's where we're starting to see change honestly. And I think that will continue to resonate as we look to go and we look to learn because we still are learning every single day that what we thought worked yesterday doesn't work tomorrow, So that's just part of it.
All right. What would you say to young Dan, like getting into the role? Let's say you're up fresh. You can advise your younger self, like first day at CHG. Like, what would you say to Dan? Like, what? Please do this differently, or do this the same, or do more of that. Like,
Yeah.
what would your advice to your younger self be?
Keep an open mind. Don't take things too personally in terms of like what may be working or what might not be working, and lean into your adaptability as a skill set. But other than that, I would say can keep doing it just what you did because I think the times that I've stubbed my toe, the times that I've gone down a path that I thought for sure was going to be right, only to realize it was a dead end, I have learned immensely from that, what to do and what not to do. And so like no, go make mistakes. Just don't be scared to make mistakes and don't make them too big and learn from them. But like try new things, really try to understand who your end users are and have fun. This is a something that's really, really interesting and cool. And so yeah, that would be my advice.
Dan, you are fantastic. Thank you so much for joining me today. If people want to reach out to you, hear tactics or ways that you've done, where can they find you?
hmm Yeah. You can find me on LinkedIn. There's a lot of Dan Sullivan, so I have a very generic name. So you might want to search by Dan Sullivan CHG Healthcare just as a tip. Reach out to me anytime, and I will happily connect and be able to chat with you.
Awesome. Awesome.
And thank you
And
for having me.
maybe we should do, yeah, no, my pleasure. I was thinking like in a year or so, we should have you back and do a check in on
That'd
the
be awesome.
progress and see like how that 5 year vision is coming to be and how that journey led CHG is operating.
I'd love to. That sounds great. Thank you so much. And it's been a sincere pleasure on my end to have the opportunity to talk about this stuff. And I really appreciate the platform. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. All right, and that's it. Thank you so much for listening. If you found it valuable today, don't forget to subscribe to the Experience Edge on your favorite podcast channel, leave a review, and share it with your team. I'd be delighted. Today's episode was brought to you by TheyDo, an AI journey management solution for enterprise. To have an edge on your business strategy and to know why your customers do what they do, visit theydo.com and explore more resources to accelerate your customer experience game. And remember, the journey to creating customer centric impact never ends. And here's always a new edge to discover in doing things differently. Next week, new episode. Until then, keep pushing the edge, stay inspired. See you in the next episode.